History isn't written by the victors. It's written by those who can successfully hallucinate in public. We call them visionaries until they fail. Then we call them monsters. Elizabeth Holmes, a woman who sold a revolution in a drop of blood. But here is the question that haunts the ruins of Theranos. Did she know she was lying? To understand Holmes, we must stop looking at her as a CEO. We must look at her as an alchemist. She didn't just break the law. She tried to rewrite the laws of biology with the power of sheer will. Welcome to Psyche of Power. Today, we dissect the most dangerous weapon in the human arsenal, the ability to ignore reality. This is the deep dive into self-deception. Why did the smartest men in the world lose out? 9 billion to a college dropout. It wasn't because they were stupid. It's because she offered them the one thing more addictive than money: immortality. Her gaze was her primary tool. She didn't blink. In the wild, animals blink to process information. Not blinking is a sign of a predator, or a person who has already decided what the truth is. The Edison, a box that was supposed to run 200 tests on a single prick of blood. Physics said it was impossible. Elizabeth said physics was just a suggestion. Silicon Valley thrives on fake it till you make it. But Holmes took this to a biological extreme. She didn't just fake the tech. She faked her own personhood. To understand the reality tunnel Holmes inhabited, we have to look at the first reversal of this story. Act 1. The architecture of the lie. At age 7, Elizabeth wrote a letter saying she wanted to discover something new, something that mankind didn't know was possible. This wasn't ambition. It was a messiah complex in the cradle. She dropped out of Stanford at 19. She didn't want to learn the rules. She wanted to be the rule maker. This is where we encounter our first psychological deep dive, Robert Trivers' theory of self-deception. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers argued that we deceive ourselves to better deceive others. If you believe your own lie, your body doesn't give off the tells. No sweat, no shifting eyes, no high-pitched voice. Elizabeth Holmes didn't act confident. She was confident because she had successfully deleted the truth from her own conscious mind. She wasn't a liar in the traditional sense. She was a self-deceiver. She entered what philosopher Robert Anton Wilson calls a reality tunnel. When you are in the tunnel, every piece of data that contradicts your goal is filtered out as noise. Only the signal remains. When her lead scientist, Gibbons, told her the technology didn't work, she didn't see a scientific fact. She saw a negative person who needed to be removed. She surrounded herself with the elders, men like George Shultz, former Secretary of State. Why? Because these men were at the end of their lives. They wanted a miracle. They weren't investing in a company. They were investing in the fountain of youth. And Holmes was the priestess holding the cup. Then came the voice. She dropped her voice to a baritone. A forced, unnatural depth. This is enclosed cognition taken to a theatrical level. Studies show we associate deeper voices with authority and competence. She wasn't just changing her clothes. She was hacking the primal lizard brains of her investors. By 2014, Theranos was valued at 9 billion. Elizabeth was the youngest self-made female billionaire. The reality tunnel was now a fortress. But here is the first cognitive reversal. The very thing that made her successful, her absolute refusal to see reality, was the very thing that ensured her destruction. Act 2. The collapse of the hallucination. To stay in the reality tunnel, Holmes had to practice cognitive decoupling. She had to separate the vision from the execution. Inside the labs, the Edison was failing. It was exploding. It was giving false results to cancer patients. This wasn't just a business failure. It was a moral catastrophe. She worshipped Steve Jobs. She copied his walk, his clothes, even his reality distortion field. But Jobs had a secret. He eventually delivered the products. When the tech failed, Holmes didn't pivot. She doubled down. She started running blood tests on Siemens machines, the very competitors she claimed to have made obsolete. This is the sunk cost fallacy on a messianic scale. If she admitted the Edison didn't work, her entire identity, the alchemist, the prophet, would vanish. How did she sleep at night? Psychologists call it moral decoupling. She believed her greater good, revolutionizing healthcare, justified the minor evil of lying to patients today. People were getting results that said they were having miscarriages when they weren't, or that they were healthy when their kidneys were failing. The lie was now lethal. The unexpected yet logical truth: she didn't see the patients. She saw data points that hadn't aligned with the vision yet. Enter the antagonist of her reality, the truth. John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal. Carreyrou didn't have a vision, he had facts. And in the battle between a prophet and a fact checker, the prophet usually wins until the money runs out. Holmes reacted like a cult leader. She used legal intimidation, private investigators, and psychological warfare to silence anyone who spoke of the outside reality. She wasn't defending a company. She was defending her soul's survival. If Theranos was a lie, then Elizabeth Holmes didn't exist. Cognitive reversal number 2. We think she was the one manipulating the investors. But the truth is, the investors were manipulating her into being the icon they needed. Silicon Valley was desperate for a female Steve Jobs. They were so hungry for the narrative that they became conspirators in their own deception. This is the Asch conformity effect. If everyone in the boardroom says the machine works, the one person who knows it doesn't will eventually doubt their own eyes. Even when the Wall Street Journal exposed her, she went on stage and said, "This is what happens when you try to change the world. First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world." She used the language of the persecuted visionary to mask the actions of a corporate criminal. Act 3. The trial of the self. At her trial, the prophet disappeared. She replaced her with a victim. She claimed her soul, Sunny Balwani, had controlled her, abused her, and forced the lie. Was this a new lie? Or was she simply entering a new reality tunnel to survive? Here we find our third deep dive, the Cassandra complex in reverse. Cassandra was cursed to know the truth, but never be believed. Holmes was the opposite. She believed her own lies, and everyone followed her into the fire. Consider the ship of Theseus philosophy. If Holmes replaced her voice, her clothes, her board members, and her technology, was there ever a real Elizabeth Holmes at the center? Perhaps the most terrifying psychological realization is that at the core of Elizabeth Holmes, there was no inner truth. There was only a void that took the shape of whatever the world wanted to see. January 2022. Guilty on 4 counts of fraud. 11 years in prison. The reality tunnel finally hit a wall. Even in prison, reports say she remains charming and visionary. The self-deception didn't end with the verdict. It's her biological operating system. We like to think of Elizabeth Holmes as an anomaly, a one-off monster. But she is the logical conclusion of our culture. We live in an attention economy where perception is more valuable than product. If you can convince enough people that your lie is the truth, it becomes the truth for all practical purposes, until the blood stops flowing. Theranos failed because biology is the one thing you cannot disrupt. You can lie to a VC, but you cannot lie to a molecule of hemoglobin. She was a modern alchemist. Alchemists didn't just want to make gold. They wanted to achieve the great work, transmutation. Transmuting a 19-year-old girl into a god. Transmuting a plastic box into a savior. The psychology of the hardcore vision requires a total death of the self. You must become the vision, and once you are the vision, any attack on the vision is an attempt to murder you. Self-deception isn't a bug in the human brain, it's a feature. It allows us to take risks that are objectively insane. Without some level of self-deception, no one would ever start a company, go to war, or fall in love. We all need to believe the lie, just a little bit. But Holmes didn't just believe the lie, she became the lie. This is the pathological certainty that defines cult leaders and tyrants. The media is just as guilty. They didn't do their homework because the story was too good to fact check. She was a Rorschach test for Silicon Valley. Everyone saw what they wanted to see. The feminists saw a pioneer. The old men saw a daughter. The investors saw a unicorn. Philosophy tells us that reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Fele. Dick. Elizabeth Holmes tried to make reality go away. She almost succeeded. What is the Psyche of Power lesson here? Power doesn't just corrupt. Power deludes. When you are powerful, everyone around you confirms your reality tunnel. No one says no. The feedback loop becomes a mirror maze. She was trapped in her own success. The more money she raised, the more impossible it became to tell the truth. A lie of that magnitude requires constant maintenance. It consumes 100% of your cognitive energy. Imagine the mental toll. Every second of every day, she had to be Elizabeth Holmes. There was no rest, no reality to retreat to. She likely dissociated. The Elizabeth who knew it was a fraud was buried so deep she couldn't be reached. She turned Theranos into a panopticon. Employees were tracked, their emails read, their every word recorded. The irony? She built a prison for her employees, but she was the first person locked inside it. We are drawn to people like Holmes because we are bored. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, has found a shortcut. We want the drop of blood to be enough. We want the magic. But alchemy always ends in lead. Elizabeth Holmes is currently serving her time, but the reality tunnel she built hasn't been dismantled. It's just moved on to the next visionary. Look around. Who else is telling you they can do the impossible. Who else is using a deep voice and a steady gaze to bypass your logic? The brain is wired to follow. It takes a hardcore effort to stop and ask, is this a vision, or is this a hallucination? In the end, blood doesn't lie. It's just a liquid. It's the stories we tell about it that have the power to destroy us. Elizabeth Holmes didn't ignore reality. She tried to murder it. But reality has a way of coming back for its revenge. This has been a psychological autopsy of a lie. If you want to understand the power of the mind, you must first understand its capacity for self-deception. Don't just watch the news. Watch the psyche. This is Psyche of Power. Subscribe or stay in the tunnel. The choice is yours.